Okay, so we're going to start with creating volumetric lighting and parenting that light to an object. And you can do a lot of things with this. You can do headlights, you can do flashlights, really anything you can think of, lasers, lightsabers, anything like that. It also creates a really dramatic look. So this light here, we call it volumetric because it has actual volume to it. It has substance and a shape. And it goes back to film noir. You can create these really intense, dramatic scenes like in these film noir films. You can create that kind of lighting situation. All right, so I just created a really simple box and a floor in Modeler. So you can create whatever you want for this. And then I made a flashlight, which is just 2 discs, one long disc and one other disc, to do the parenting. And I recognize in mine, I can't see the actual flashlight. I would need another light here to see it, but I'm just gonna show you how to do these techniques, and then you can come up with how you want to use them. Okay, so I cleared my scene and I started with just my models. Let me move this light out of the way. And you can see my flashlight is really big, so it's too big for this. So I'm just gonna modify size and make it a little smaller. And then I'm gonna do some setup here while I'm in my perspective view. So I'm gonna get my light and my flashlight set up so it's pointing at my cube here the way I want it to be while I'm on my 0 frame. So I'm not animating anything. So I'm just on my flashlight. I have each in its own layer, so I can come to objects and my current item, and I have my layers named, so this is flashlight. And I can just press T, and then I can press Y to rotate and get it kind of facing my block. I'm gonna press T again. And then I'm always just moving around and kind of checking it out, how I want it to look. And then I'm gonna line up my light. Before I do anything with my light, I'm just gonna get them set up together, working together. So one thing I always make the mistake of doing is I put the light inside the flashlight, and then when you set it up, you can't actually see the light gets blocked by the object. So if you're trying to do this and your light isn't working, it might be because your light's inside. So if I'll zoom in and I'll show you what I mean. So if I have my light, in my flashlight, inside the object here, it will be the solidness of the object will actually block the light from coming through. So you want it a little bit in front. So just don't put the light right inside the flashlight unless you have a hole in there or something for it so it can shine through. Okay, so we got everything set up. I have it pointing at my object. I'm gonna come into my camera view, current camera, and I'm gonna come to my camera properties, make sure I'm in HD, of course, 1920 by 1080, and then I'm just gonna set up my camera. So I'm with the move tool with T, and I'm rotating, and I'm just gonna make it kind of so we're looking down on it. And so obviously yours is gonna depend on your scene. And then I'm gonna come into VPR so we can see what the light situation is. Now that's way too bright. It's obviously not what we want. So I also, to make it more dramatic, just want the backdrop to be black for this. So in really any tab, you have the option to see the backdrop. So I'm coming to backdrop and just unchecking the gradient backdrop. And already that's making it look more dramatic, but it's not that spotlight look that we're going for. So to create the spotlight, we need to give it some volumetrics. So we'll do the volumetrics in the light properties and in the render properties. So I'm down here at lights, I'm pressing properties, and you want to make sure this is checked, affect volumetrics. So if that's not checked, make sure you have yours. I'm also going to come into my render tab and come into my render properties, and we're going to uncheck Enable GI. That's something you get in the habit of, because remember, that takes away those speckly things. And then there's a Volumetrics tab right next to Global Illumination. And so the thing you want to check here is Use Volumetric Scattering. Make sure you check that. That's the important thing here. It's still not looking the way mine looked when we started, because we have to change some more of the light properties to get it there. So you can actually, of course, make sure Enable Volumetrics is on, and then Use Volumetric Scattering, okay? This is on usually, I think, by default, but just make sure that's checked. Okay, so there's a couple different lights. You can try using a point light, but I'm gonna go ahead and go to the spotlight. So I can just change the light type to spot, and you can see it's starting to look a little more how we want it to look. I'm gonna turn the light intensity up. I was practicing this before, and around 19 or 20 was a good situation for me. You want to make sure the intensity fall off is on, so you don't want to turn it off. I'll show you what it looks like. When you turn it off, it's not as realistic looking. So the intensity fall off being on scatters the light in a more realistic way. And then you can just adjust your light intensity depending on the kind of light you have. All right, now we can animate the light turning on and off. So you can have like headlights blinking, you can have a flashlight blinking, you can have a lightsaber, buzzing on and off. Totally up to you, or getting brighter and softer. And we do that in the envelope button. So we're here in the light intensity, and we're just gonna make the light start totally off, totally black, and then have it turn on. And you can animate yours however you want. So I'm just pressing the E here next to the light intensity. And we saw this with some other projects. So it's just a graph. On the bottom represents the timeline, and on the left side here is the light intensity. So right now you can see we have it at 19. It's staying at 19 all throughout the timeline. Now we add keyframes with this little key button with the plus on it. So we add a keyframe, maybe we'll put one at 20. And then you select the keyframes with the button to the left, so this little crosshair thing. So I'm going to click on keyframe 0. I could have also typed in keyframe 0 right here. And then I'm going to start with a value of 0. So we'll start with a 0 at 0. And then at keyframe 21, or maybe I'll make it 20, keyframe 20, we can make it all the way to 20. And then this kind of goes off of the graph that we're in. So you can come up top here and go to auto fit and just auto fit it in to see it. Sometimes let's add another keyframe here, because sometimes it gets a little messed up, and I want to show you what that looks like. So I'm going to add another keyframe. Yeah, this is what I wanted to show you. So sometimes it gets curved, and sometimes it can curve into the negative. And if you don't want that curve to be there, so I can come into my crosshairs, I can click, I'm clicking on, this is at frame 28, I'm just clicking on the keyframe that I made there, and there's this incoming curve. I can turn it to linear so that it's just straight. And then I can make it higher or lower. That's totally up to you. So now let's see, if I scroll on the timeline, we can see it coming on. And you can see how you can make a bunch of keyframes right next to each other. Obviously I'm in VPR, so it's taking a while to render, but you can have a spotlight coming on, you can have stuff blinking, you can really do whatever you want. So you can just keep on adding keyframes with this keyframe button and changing the values to be lighter and darker, depending on what kind of look you want. And then remember, if you're really unhappy, if you're messing around with the envelope and you don't like the way it looks and you made too many keyframes, you can delete all of the keyframes just by pressing Shift and clicking here on this E button, on the envelope button here next to light intensity. So that's a way to get rid of all of the keyframes. It deletes everything. So if you get, I encourage you to experiment, and if you get stuck, you can just delete them all. Okay, now I'm going to come out of VPR to show you how to parent stuff. So I want to make the flashlight, my flashlight object that I made here, control the light. So when the flashlight moves, the light moves. So this is great for all kinds of stuff that you can imagine. Obviously, headlights or motorcycle lights, a flashlight, of course, a lightsaber, any kind of laser. So it's a lot more simple than it seems. I was pretty honestly intimidated by this, and it's not that as complicated as it sounds. I'm gonna just get my light a little closer since I changed the type of light it was. It went from a distant light to a spotlight. It's a little smaller on here, so I'm just gonna get it close to my flashlight shape and just kind of look around, and I think that looks good. Okay, I'm coming back into my current camera view. I'm gonna get it even a little closer. Remember, I don't want it to be inside. I kind of just want it to be right in front of the flashlight. So I'm setting up my light so it looks like it's actually coming out of the flashlight. And then I come into my scene editor. From any tab, the scene editor is possible. So it doesn't matter what tab you're in. You're in editor, scene editor, and it's just scene editor. This pops up. And all you have to do to parent something, this is my light that I'm selected on. And because I named all of my layers, it's very clear here. And I just drag it under flashlight. So a thing that can be a little weird is it has to be indented. Sometimes it feels like you're just moving it in between the two, and you want to make sure that it's indented so this little black triangle happens, and the light is actually, when you close it, you don't see the light anymore. So you have to open up the flashlight, and the light is indented underneath the flashlight, because then it becomes parented to it. So if you're just, let me drag it out again. You can kind of see when I'm dragging, a gray line appears, and you can move it just under the flashlight, or I have to kind of click and drag and scroll up a little bit until that gray line looks indented a bit. It just takes a little practice. I think the important thing is that then this black triangle will appear, and you can scroll it open or closed, and then it's parented to my flashlight. The parent is the flashlight. That's the one that has the triangle on it. That controls the child. The light is the child. So the parent controls the child, the flashlight controls the light, but the child does not control the parent. So you can move the light around and animate it independently of the flashlight, but if you move the flashlight, this light is going to move. Let me show you. So I'm on the flashlight, I'm pressing Y to rotate, and if I move the flashlight at all, the light is going to move. But then I can be on the light, I'm pressing Y to rotate, and I can move the light and it's not affecting the flashlight at all. So the flashlight is the parent, the object is the parent, and that's going to move the light every time I move it. But the child, the light there, is not going to move the actual object, the flashlight. So the parent controls the child does not control the parent. So now you can animate it. So the light, oh whoops, I had my time indicator at 13, of course, so I animated it all crazy all over the place. Let me pause and I'll fix it. Okay, so now I fixed what I messed up because I had made some keyframes accidentally, which I know you can all relate to. So my light turns on at frame 19, and then I'm just gonna animate it moving. So I'm clicking on my flashlight, and I'm pressing Y to rotate. And let me get in my perspective view. So sometimes the rotation on the object, the rotation control. See how it moved behind it? So I'm just gonna get into my perspective view so I can see it. So if you ever lose anything, just come into your perspective view, and now my rotation control is behind my light. So I'm just moving my time indicator. I'm moving it to 21, and I'm rotating it a little bit, and then you can move it down and rotate it a little more, like the light's searching. I could also press T to zoom it in and maybe go down further, and then I can continue moving down the timeline just the way we've been doing. I can continue rotating and moving this light. Let's see in the current camera, and we can come, okay, the VPR is going to look really bad because it's going to be rendering, but you can kind of see, you know, the light can be moving around and turning on, and it can be blinking. And I know it's not easy to tell in this, but you can do a lot with this. And then we can't see my actual flashlight, but if I wanted to see the flashlight, the parented object, you know, I could add another little area light or some soft light here on the side just so I can see it. I think you guys know how to do that, so I'm not going to spend the time to show you. So that is parenting and volumetrics.